All right, folks, let me call the meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled, called and convened City of Greer Council workshop. Workshop was called and convened around the subject of housing assessment and a strategy report that will be coming from our Planning and Development Department and Director Alex Cahill. With that, we will go into our workshop. The floor is yours, sir.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor and honorable council members. This is a great timing because the South Carolina House did pass Bill 5390, which declared the month of May as Affordable Housing Awareness Month. And it directed us to all residents, community organizations, and public leaders in the state of South Carolina to work together to advance housing stability and strengthen communities across the state. So this timing couldn't be more perfect. You know, as our community continues to grow and evolve, the City of Greer is committed to addressing the opportunities and challenges that come with that growth through thoughtful planning, collaboration, and innovation. So tonight's discussion really reflects that commitment and builds upon the priorities that we outlined during the August 2025 State of the Department. I know some of you weren't here at the time. We have 2 new council members. Happy to have you. And at that time, we talked about 3 priorities being expanding housing opportunities, strengthening community engagement, and taking a more proactive approach to community compliance. So to help move the housing effort forward, the city did engage Civitas LLC to assist in Greer's housing needs and opportunities study through a comprehensive and data-driven approach. The approach really was to look at not just affordable housing, but housing across the housing spectrum, as we know there's a need at all different levels. Civitas was selected from 8 competitive professional services bids. They were the lowest bid and the most innovative in their solicitation. Civitas is a national community development consulting firm, and they have done most of the housing studies in the upstate region for our peer and corresponding jurisdictions. So before I introduce the consultant tonight that will walk you through the housing study and the recommendations that came out of it, I do want to take a moment to recognize planner Heather Stahl. She has been the project manager on this. She doesn't love attention, but she has overseen this from solicitation until the study tonight, so we appreciate her efforts in managing this project. At this time, I do want to introduce Rich Kaplan. He is an associate with Civitas LLC. He's going to present the findings tonight, go over the recommendations, and then there'll be plenty of time for us to have a discussion. Thank you so much. Rich?
Thank you, Alex. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, it's a pleasure to be here this evening, and I've enjoyed working with the staff and interview each of you on several of the issues that we're going to be talking about tonight. The agenda will go with we'll go over some demographic highlights because obviously you have to look at the housing market in the context of what's happening in the community, give you a profile of the housing in Greer, show you the key findings that we've come up with, and then some strategic recommendations. To start with, some of the key findings, as you well know, rapid population growth, which is a blessing and a curse. We're just starting work in one community. In the last year and a half, they haven't had 1 housing permit issued. So you obviously, you know, on the other side of the spectrum, and it's a great situation and great opportunities. We also found that renters are most cost burdened in the community, and we'll go into the details on that in just a minute. Some of the good news is you have a very healthy pipeline of projects and subdivisions and residential units and a mix of residential units in that pipeline. Of course, what's driving this growth in population is the strong employment growth. As you know, the employment growth has been very strong throughout the South Carolina, especially in Greenville and Spartanburg counties. Greenville County, I think, is second in the state in growth, and Spartanburg County, in terms of total numbers, about 6th in growth. So that's really driving. You're in the middle of that growth mode. There is a affordability gap that we'll talk about in just a minute in more detail, and then talk about some of the policies that we're recommending. First of all, as you can see, the population growth in Greer has been staggering, to say the least, and South Carolina, the Post-Courier recognizes that, you all recognize that, and as strong as it's been in Greenville County, it's even the strongest, Greer is the strongest. City of Spartanburg is really unusual because they are somewhat landlocked, but Spartanburg County itself has also grown about 50% during this time frame. And what's driving this growth? I think three things. One, jobs, as we mentioned, the growth in employment opportunities in the upstate and in Greenville and Spartanburg counties. The second thing I think driving growth is the cost of living. Even though we all cringe sometimes, besides the gas pump, everything else, other things that are going up. You talk to people, as I'm sure you do, moving here from the Northeast or from Florida or from other parts of the country, and they think the cost of living in South Carolina in this region is very reasonable, and that's a real driving force. And of course, the quality of life. I think we all appreciate that. I've only lived in South Carolina 10 years, and I've lived in some wonderful places, but I think I put South Carolina at very top of that because of the mountains, the beach, the hills, the lakes, the rivers. It's really, and the general attitude people have about living here is really positive, and that makes a great difference. As I mentioned, the employment, Greer itself has grown by 44%. Of course, that's driven in part by the intermodal station and by the proximity to the airport. And certainly Spartanburg County has been very aggressive in terms of attracting new employment in the area. The other area is notice that the poverty rate in Greer is only 10.1%, and while every person in poverty is too high, it is lower than the metropolitan area, which is about 11.4%, and lower than the statewide poverty rate, which is over 14%. So even though you have a pretty healthy economy, I also have the households that are reasonably affordable and fewer people in that poverty income level. When we look at the land use, which is where you're accommodating all this growth, as you know, the 28 plus square miles, over 91% of your housing, your land is residential single family. And that is, has an impact, of course, on infrastructure. It has an impact on other issues. And you do have, as I've mentioned, 31 single-family or townhome subdivisions in the pipeline right now. I'm not sure how often you get periodic reports from your community development staff, but they're very good at keeping, with that much activity, keeping track of every project and the status of it. And you have over 2,900 units within those subdivisions. Almost 10 of those subdivisions are currently under review, and over 900 units are in the pipeline that could conceivably expect to take out a building permit within the reasonable period of time. When you dive a little deeper into that, out of those 961 units, interestingly enough, a majority are in townhomes or multifamily, and that's probably a reflection of a couple things. One, the cost of housing is such, and I'll talk about more in detail in a moment, that townhomes are becoming increasingly common throughout the country, and including in Greenville County and Spartanburg County and Greer as well. So developers are getting more interested in accepting of building townhomes, and the market is accepting townhomes. Also, of course, you have a lot of multifamily in the pipeline right now. Part of the reason single family is low is in part because the market's picking those units up very quickly. Now, I think there's some slowdown this year, a little bit in single-family development, but I think that's more a blip on the upstate more than a permanent trend. As I mentioned, if you look at the housing a little deeper, over 70% of the houses in Greer are 70% are single family. This is usually much higher than most other communities. You see them only 7.9%, and in larger multifamily. This is how the city keeps track of units, 10 units or more in multifamily, and 7.3% in 2 to 9 unit projects. There seems to be some attitude and about supporting, lower density in Greer, and that's not uncommon. There's always a resistance, most places, I would say, to higher density, whether it's a rural community that I just came from that desperately needs housing and turned down a 35-unit apartment building because of the neighborhood concern. So, and that happens across the country. I don't need to restate the NIMBYism, but I want to talk about there's another attitude that is saying yes in my backyard, and that's people that are housing advocates, and including non-religious groups and nonprofit groups that are trying to educate the communities across the country about the value of housing. And I appreciate that Alex mentioned the Affordable Housing Month. That's one of the areas that people are trying to educate elected officials and the public at large and neighborhood groups, that yes, density is not a 4-letter word. It is a 7-letter word, but it's also a positive, can be very positive in terms of, maximizing infrastructure and allowing, a lot of density. Give the example, I live in a townhome in Greenville, and the way the townhome is designed, we actually have more privacy than the single-family house that I used to live in, which had backyards. I could see everybody else's backyards. In this sense, the design is such that you do have privacy. So it does come down a lot of times to design, not just density. So I mentioned we looked at what the needs are, and of course, since 2020, you have been gangbusters in terms of the residential development, the highest rate of in the city's history from 2020 to 2025, averaged over 800 units a year. That rate is just not sustainable for the market and for probably the Greer infrastructure and the planning staff and everybody else. So we have projected, though, a demand for additional 2,800 units between now and 2030. That averages around 450, 500 units a year, which is more like the pace that you grew from the 2010 to 2020. So obviously, everybody anticipates continued job growth in the upstate, including the Greenville Area Development Council and One Spartanburg are both very professional and proactive in accommodating new jobs, and there's no reason to think that is going to decline. When you look at home values in Greer, you're right about in the middle of the pack in terms of the suburban communities of Greenville County, very comparable to between Simpsonville and Malden and Fountain Inn, right about in the middle of that. I think Greenville County averages a little higher, in part because of the city of Greenville is the most expensive housing, but it's really not comparable. It's important to Greer, but the city of Greenville housing market is really a much different animal than the suburban communities that we compared you to. Of course, Greenville County is much higher than Spartanburg County as well. And then if you look at home value, we also look at that from not just the cost of the homes, but what do you get for your dollar? And if you compare Greer, as we did, to other communities, As you can see, Greer is right in the middle in terms of the value you get for your dollar in terms of how much house you get. $166 per square foot at the end of 2025. The Greenville Area Realtors Association expects that to continue to climb as it has for all people that are homeowners. In terms of the cost per square foot, they're expecting growth to go up the cost of housing to average about 3.1% higher in 2026 than it was in 2025. That translates into another $5,000 per household, in terms of cost. So then affordability was, as we said, an important component of our analysis. The average median sale price in 2025 in Greer was $346,000. If you look at a 20% down payment and you look at what the 6% interest rates, you actually have about 54% of the households that can afford to buy that average home in Greer. That seems, and 45.9% that cannot afford that. While maybe that seems a little high, relatively speaking, it's really a very good ratio. We've done a lot of work in Arizona and California and in Charleston, and you see that the affordability is much lower percentage of people that can afford to buy homes, even with higher incomes. The other factor we looked at, because townhomes are growing in Greer and elsewhere, is the affordability of a townhome. As you can see, the townhome is average price in 2025 sold for $238,000. That means it's almost 70% of the households in Greer can afford to buy a townhome, and that's in fact why developers are building more townhomes, because they're in the business, obviously, of selling. There's a couple other factors influencing that I'll talk about in a minute. When you look at rental housing, the rental market has gone up significantly in the last 2 years, from a median of 1,200 in 2024 to over 1,500 right now in January of 2026 when we put these numbers together. And you have a higher percentage of people that are cost burdened for rentals, which I'll show you in just a minute. The average household there's plenty of apartments for people that are in the 50% to 120% median income levels. Where you have a shortage, not surprising to you or anyone else, is in the affordability. Those people that are low income, there is a shortage of rental housing that they can afford. 408 units right now, the current gap, and that's obviously changes daily, but that's a reasonable number, a sizable number. But also, interestingly enough, you have a shortage of high-end rental housing. And that's a little unique to some communities. I think in Greenville, for example, there is no shortage of high-end rental housing. In fact, it's almost amazing some of the rents that some of the new developments get in Greenville. And one of your strategies, if you want to address that, is to work with some of the developers that are down the road and see to build more. I wouldn't call them unaffordable housing, but higher end housing. That's going to attract higher income persons, and certainly there's more and more young households that can't afford down payments anyway, and would be more and more happy to live in rental housing. So when you look at sort of a graph we put together in terms of what people can afford and what there is, as you can see, a shortage of the my colleague put this together, and I like it, but it's not quite as easy to understand as I like maybe. There is a shortage of about 400 units for rental housing and shortage in the higher-end housing. So what are some of the takeaways before we get into the strategies? Certainly, growth is outpacing affordability, and that is not unique to Greer. It's not as severe in Greer, but it is common, and you have about 2,800 units that are going to be built in the next 5 years, and you can have influence over the prices points of that, whether it's through incentives or other kinds of strategies, zoning and planning strategies. It doesn't have to be financial, which you can influence the higher end and the lower end of housing. Renters at the bottom are definitely underserved. As I said, there are 408 shortage of low-income rental housing, and market forces alone cannot take care of that. The cost of materials, the cost of labor, cost of land for housing construction, as we all appreciate, has all gone up, all categories, and you just can't build affordable housing, which also means maintaining your existing housing stock becomes, rental housing and owner housing becomes very more important than ever. 45.9% of the households cannot afford the median single-family home. And there are several policy tools that we're going to recommend that you may have heard about in other places and ought to consider in Greer that I'll go into detail in just a minute.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Go back to the last slide.
Yeah.
The 46% of households cannot afford the median single family. Have you done any historical or analyze any historical data, say from, let's just go back to 46, because that's when the big change in housing started, what that percentage would be?
We have not done historical. It's a good question. But what's happening that some of you may know is that in 2022, 32% of the home buyers were first-time buyers. In 2025, that number's down to 21% first-time home buyers.
What was the year?
4 years ago, it was 32%. Now it's down to 21%. So, first-time home buyers are declining because of the down payment. You can blame interest rates, but those of us that have been around for a while, 6% is not unreasonable if you look back sometimes in the 80s and 90s what interest rates were. So 6% seems high because it was, under 4% for several years. But it is not just the interest rates, it's really the cost of land, the cost of infrastructure, the cost of the cost of materials that have all gone up. So we don't have a perspective, but I can tell you that number, I'm sure, is higher than it was years ago. The percent is also lower than some other communities, and I think you should, appreciate that. It's always going to be a challenge, and not everybody wants to be a home buyer. In fact, one of the other factor that's influencing home prices that's the market is adjusting to is the average home size in the country in the last 10 years has gone down by about over 100 square feet. The average home size in 2016 was about 1,900 square feet. Now it's about 1,800 square feet. So developers are understanding that the cost is a factor, and they're building smaller homes. The other factor, the other national trend that's important is that more people are working from home than ever before. So you're seeing homes that have more flexibility in their design to accommodate that. Instead of an extra bedroom, it may be an office as well as not just an extra bedroom. And in fact, 11% in the last census, 11% of the residents working force in Greer work out of their home. And that's really a pretty important factor in terms of looking for housing, because housing, people want to have a house that, or apartment where they can also have amenities and work from home. So some of the actions we're recommending in terms of the near term is, first of all, a rental housing registration inspection ordinance. This is increasingly common in a lot of communities. Sometimes it even pays for itself or can make money, but it's a matter of making sure every rental housing that you have contact with the owners of the property. Sometimes they're out of town, and that's even more important, to make sure that the units are inspected on a periodic basis, whether that's every year, every 2 years. Different cities do different approaches, but they have, or each time the renter goes to a new renter or the ownership turns over, you have an inspection. We've recommended Florence, South Carolina, and Rock Hill, South Carolina, in the last couple of years have adopted rental inspection ordinances, and encourage the city to take a look at those strategies that they've adopted. And those are not conservative or liberal cities, they're just cities that are dealing with, they're trying to maintain their quality housing stock. Second is to develop a communication and engagement strategy, and that relates to not just adopting a resolution about affordable housing, but also putting more information about housing opportunities on the city website, working closely with the local lenders, local realtors, making sure that they understand what the city's attitudes are, and trying to get them involved. A lot of cities, worked in one city in North Carolina where the city council set up a lot of cities are doing this, a housing subcommittee to look at housing issues, made up of 1 or 2 planning commissioners and 1 or 2 council members, or whatever number you come up with. So that housing isn't just a every 6 months review or report from the community development department, but you're staying on top of the trends and maybe considering policies on an ongoing basis to recommend to the full city council policy. A third area is to revise the development ordinance, unified development ordinance. I know that the city has done some good work in upgrading the development ordinance and making it a little more user-friendly, but there are other things that you can do. We've seen in some communities where the staff has a little more flexibility, if you will, to make decisions. You have as you know, a very professional and high-quality planning staff, and they know the code very well, and giving them a little more flexibility. There's also other things that you can do, such as we talked about increasing density. Nobody wants more traffic, but if there's going to be more housing, put it on the main corridors, obviously not in smaller subdivisions. Mixed use is great, but where it belongs, and as you're doing in your downtown, it's very commendable. That's a great place to put that higher density. Also, addressing things like parking, minimum parking standards. I know in residential areas, parking has come up with a couple of council members, but what we're talking about is, for example, senior housing should have maybe a different parking standard than traditional multifamily housing, or you should have a different standard based on the size of the units. As I said, when 11% of the people are working from home, that affects the parking situation. When you have a lot of more studios, you can certainly have lower the parking standards as well. And that's, again, what that does, it means that the developer can put more density into a property and also lower the cost of the rental properties if he has to put less land dedicated for open space or for parking use. Add value to, yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I believe density is proper for a municipality. I think that's where it belongs. It doesn't belong outside the boundaries of a municipal municipality, and, but based on the powers that have been at the state level, it's very hard to stop a lot of sprawl that you see out. But anyway, we're doing our part, I think, as far as density. But you said if you reduce the parking requirements, that will allow the developer to reduce the price of their unit. Now, if I'm a developer, unless I'm made to do that, I'm not doing that, because I want the market. I mean, I am a builder or a developer that's there to make money. And unless it's mandated, I don't think you'll see that happen. I mean, they're just not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart.
With developers, you're absolutely correct in their motivations. But I think you can, by giving the planning staff some teeth to enforce that, where you say, okay, it's common in some other states, it's not allowed in South Carolina, where you say, okay, we'll give you X number of more density if you earmark them for low-income housing or affordable housing. Greenville is in a backdoor way doing that, saying, okay, we'll give you 10% more units. Instead of 80 units, you get 88 units, but those additional units have to be rent controlled. That's not the right term, but fixed, rented to people of certain income levels. So there are strategies to do that, but yeah, it's not going to be done voluntarily. It's going to have to be done with some teeth, or some code provisions, or other incentives. You don't get these incentives unless you make them some more affordable.
Okay. I got a quick comment/question, just trying to wrap my head around. You saying the average home price was, I think it was around 340-ish?
380s,
Now,
yeah.
380, okay. And was that 77,000 per year to afford that number? I'm trying to remember back to the slide that you had earlier. Was that the number that you had?
70.3.
Yeah.
346 was the average sales price in last year. Yeah, you need a $70,000 down payment, and that.
Oh, 77.
A traditional down payment of 20%.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why I failed to mention that, some developers are getting into the rent-to-buy strategy, which is a backdoor way of getting people to become homeowners. Well, they rent for 6 months or a year with an opportunity to buy the unit, and part of their rent goes towards the down payment. I think you have 2 projects in Greer that are rent-to-buy, and that is really a growing market for both housing developers and prospective buyers. People are moving into single-family subdivisions with the intent that they're going to buy that house, but they don't buy it day one, they buy it year 1 or year 2 or year 3. So
The concepts you're mentioning, it's really, I mean, I guess we got to repackage or at least in my head, I'm repackaging how I'm looking at the housing concept. When we say affordable or workforce, these people are making relatively decent money, and they still can't.
That's right. They may qualify for a loan, but they don't have the down payment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But hasn't the 20% mark always been kind of the standard?
Yes, for second home, if you're purchase a second home, it's even higher. There are a few lenders that go down a little bit less than that, but that's sort of the industry norm.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's been the norm forever. Was that correct?
Yes, yeah.
FHA.
Yeah.
is like-
And 30 years has been sort of the norm forever. Now, when you have the option of sometimes getting a 15 or 20-year mortgage, which some people do if you can afford the mortgage, right? You're smart to do that, but you're raising your monthly payments. So
But now HUD and FHA loans are still, because like when I bought my house, I only had to put 3.5% down.
Yeah, that's what we're, exactly, you know. And using,
Yeah, we got to remember, we're looking at averages here, because you can very easily qualify for a 10% down payment, yeah.
yeah, FHA is a great program. And the state of South Carolina has a new program called Made at Home, which helps also with down payments, or induces the developer to lower their prices by, or helps, it either helps the developer or it helps the home buyer in terms of getting low-interest loans or getting forgivable loans. There's also other programs that the FHA is certainly the most common, but we're seeing some employers also called employee-assisted housing. It's sort of ironic that it's being talked about in this day and age, because you have mills in historic old upstate South Carolina that provided housing for their employees. And then that seemed to be, that it vanished, you know, but they don't, but now employers are either providing cafeteria plans to help their employees instead of, oh, we don't need full health insurance because we don't have any kids. So instead of extra health insurance, they get a housing stipend, or give that as an option as a part of, say, a cafeteria plan for new employees. I worked in a community where we actually let the employee borrow money against their retirement fund. It was a state retirement fund, but we knew that they were going to be able to, they were going to get that retirement fund eventually, or the money that they put in, and then the city had a buyback provision that if you left employment with the city, you had to, pay the city back with interest. But we had several employees that took advantage of that kind of a program. So there's all kinds of creative methods that cities are employing. It's not quite as common in an urban area like Greer, where you have a lot of choices, but in smaller towns where they're, Florence, for example, where they're trying to keep people, trying to draw jobs there and trying to keep residents from moving away, they're looking at very creative ideas to get people to be homeowners. Homeowners are going to spend more money on their house, and they're going to stay there longer and be more hesitant to relocate. I'm sorry. Let me, Heather, okay. Okay. I mentioned some of the other programs in other cities. I know CPW is not directly under city control, but there are incentives that some cities provide in terms of discounting the water or sewer connections, again, as an inducement to get more affordable housing. You don't give those discounts for any particular reason generically, but if you say, okay, this is going to be a assisted living project, for example, and people of only 120% income or less are going to live there, you work with CPW. I know it's a challenge in many communities, but they are your partners and they influence the market as well. We also talked about establishing a Greer Housing Fund. As you probably know, or may have read, that Greenville has established a housing fund where the city and the county both put money annually into the housing fund, and the Greenville Redevelopment Agency or other nonprofits have access to that money, and it's a way of offsetting some of the costs for developers of buying down the land for affordable housing or providing other discounted home loans to people. There are a variety of uses that the housing trust fund can use, and there are many throughout the country. You can participate in the Greenville Housing Fund, I'm sure, with a commitment that if you put X number of dollars in, you want X number of those dollars to be used by Greer, within the city limits of Greer. So, or you can set up your own housing trust fund, but it's a very, it shows your commitment to addressing the issues, and it doesn't have to be, incentives per se, but I can guarantee you there, a representative from LISC is here, and she could tell you a lot of different choices that they've done with housing programs that are all over, that are not just discounts to developers, but they're really helping develop affordable housing. As you know, you're not yet a CDBG entitlement city. I know the city's actively paying attention to that, and certainly that will help increase the amount of money you get and probably give more focus to housing issues once you become past that threshold. And that threshold, of course, is defined by the federal census. It's not just, we think we're over that number. I know there's floating numbers around for what the population of Greer is, and we've done our analysis just based on what HUD figures are, because HUD is going to a driving force in a lot of housing programs, and we wanted to be consistent in terms of comparing apples to apples to apples. So we've used the population number from the U.S. Census. Now, I know many cities that are growing fast don't believe the number, but that's the number you have to live with. And so as soon as that number is reached, obviously, that'll be meaningful. Expand in affordable partnerships. Again, all these ideas and suggestions and strategies we're talking about don't necessarily they don't have to be carried out by the city of Greer. There are nonprofit groups in Greer. There's Habitat for Humanity, and there's the Nehemiah Community Revitalization, and the Housing Authority, other entities that can carry out these programs for you. You can put strings on them to make sure that they use the money in the way that you prioritize, but those partnerships take the burden, political burden off of you. As long as you're putting in some financial, you can have influence on maximizing those partnerships. And there's some very meaningful organizations out there in Greenville County. Spartanburg County is also talking about setting up a house. I don't think they've set it up yet, but they're talking about a housing trust fund as well. Leverage city-owned land for affordable development. Now, you probably, as a newer city, sometimes you don't have as much surplus land as older cities. And even though the city is growing, you're annexing developable land. You're not necessarily annexing vacant land. But we found that a lot of times cities will acquire land for right-of-way or for a park or for a fire station, or have a surplus fire station and reselling that. Now, once community in suburban Kansas City I've worked in a lot, the school district was growing dramatically. It was a countywide school district, but the older part of this county had 2 or 3 elementary schools that were closed, and the school district sold those. We worked closely with the school district to make sure they sold them to housing developers. They were in residential neighborhoods. They didn't want high-rise apartments, but we got them to put townhomes in, put it at RFP, and got very interested developers. So there may be surplus school district property. Another case in where there's surplus SCDOT land. Sometimes they'll acquire land for rights-of-way, and they find out they acquired more than they need, and there can be surplus land there. So making that land available to developers can be a backdoor way of getting affordable housing. The last thing mentioned is, I say, we've worked closely over the last few months with your city staff. They seem very not only professional, but very committed to addressing the housing issues. And I hope that as you implement some of these strategies, recognize that with this many housing units under development, your staff is probably one of the very busy and can use some help. And so we'd encourage you to consider getting a specific housing planner or housing coordinator, housing manager, whatever you want to call it, to upgrade your housing, your commitment to housing. And that can be somebody that's working just with nonprofit groups or working with the banks and realtors to make some of these implementation strategies happen. Because the day-to-day can, on just active subdivisions, can be very overwhelming. And that's, so we think that, we've seen other cities with a smaller population than Greer have a bigger planning staff. So the planning staff did not tell us to say this. We just recognize that they're doing a good job. And and all these strategies don't happen overnight. They take staff work and they take a political commitment. I can guarantee you, without the political will, you're going to come back here in 5 years and the housing situation will probably be similar or worse. So you need to make, given it's Affordable Housing Month, given that you've invested this first step in a study to help understand the housing situation in your community, we'd be happy to encourage you to make a stronger commitment to putting more staff and resources, whether it's through the trust fund, the staff, or preferably both. With that, I know I've covered a lot of ground, trying to answer any questions you might have.
Council, we've got a few minutes for questions or comments, if you'd like to engage in that at this point.
Sure.
Mr. Cahill, if you want to join
What's the
as well.
with all of this, the historical data is very young. And I guess that kind of, so all my questions revolve around that, but what's the overall goal regarding housing? We've got, what was the percentage you said that are single-family homeowners? You said that was a good percentage. So is that, if it's a good percentage, is that what we want, looking to maintain? Is that, and then where does that basis come from?
Well, that basis comes from, there is no right or wrong. I mean, there's a community, wealthy community. I know in one metropolitan area, 90% are homeowners. They don't want any multifamily, and the single family that's there is rental. Some of it's rented. There is no right or wrong. That's how you define the community, as you're the policymakers of that. I would say, comparatively speaking, you have a pretty high level of home ownership and a pretty lower level of the affordability is not as severe as it is in Charleston. It's a more severe problem than it is in Greer than it is in Columbia, because Columbia, the cost of housing is lower. In Charleston, it's higher. So you're probably right in the middle of the pack in terms of that. The city of Greenville is constantly paying attention. Nothing is getting built in Greenville. New townhomes are $600,000, and they're no bigger than two-bedroom apartment. And so I don't know who's buying all this $600,000 and $800,000 townhomes in Greenville. So in the United States, we live in a market-driven economy, and that's, I think, probably the best thing we could ever do. So that means that I think there was a 10% figure where people fell below the median income level. Isn't that what you were set in part of this presentation? But you will always have that percentage, no matter what. Right.
So I'm just trying to figure out what are we comparing it to? And where is it going as far as an end game? Because, you know, this is just, seems like it's just over and over and over and over and over. But we know we're always going to have a segment of the population that either doesn't make enough money, they can't save a down payment, they don't want delayed gratification. You mentioned that developers, the average home size has dropped 100 square feet. But so what? I mean, what people have gotten, I think, used to, tract builders come in and they can build at a much lower per square foot cost, but they don't sell at a lower price point. But in an individual, because you hear this all the time, all these new houses, they're vinyl and whatever, but people are buying them. But in, let's say, the 60s, housing, in this area, you had a lot of masonry, a lot of ceramic that was just because those were the materials that were available. But I don't know where the statistics were then about everyone. I mean, all I can say is this. I mean, I concur with what you're saying about the statistics. I wish I had something to compare it to.
Right.
As to where we've gone over time, because you mentioned City of Charleston. City of Charleston is, as long as I've always known, is they're one of the most expensive places in the state to live. Okay, City of Greenville, especially now, that's fine because people are paying that. So it kind of puts a municipality in, well, if we have growth and we have success in economic development, hopefully the rising tides can raise all boats.
Sure.
But it will never raise them for everybody to be a homeowner. Anyway, I'm wondering about, it'd be great if we had some historical data just to compare them.
Yeah.
Hey, Alex, could you jump to that slide where it had like 1,500 and 1,200? To keep going? No, keep going one more.
Households.
It was like, it showed like we had, that one.
Can I, just to address what you're saying, I appreciate the question. So two things, Councilmember Airwood, we can definitely work before the next session to get you some historical data. I think that's good to see the trend over time. I understand what you're asking, so that's data we can pull together, I think. Second thing is, I think what we haven't talked about is Greer is actually uniquely positioned right now. Our supply of housing has been really strong, and that's one of the things to align with kind of what you're saying with market forces. Because we have such a strong pipeline and supply of housing, we have been able to stay slightly above the rest of our peer cities in terms of, you hear about the affordability crisis across the nation. We're slightly ahead of that because we've had such a robust supply in that market component. Staff feels the balance right now of the 70% homeownership, 30% rental is about right. You want a good mix of both in your community, and we see that being sustained over time through some of these recommendations. I think where we get to is whether we as a city and whether you as policymakers decide what should we do for that deep affordability. You know, it may not be the city's role to, construct homes. I've been a role where you've done that before. I will tell you, it's not the most fun thing. But it might be the city's role to help support nonprofits in that work and help get them to a place to support that 10% that you're discussing. So I think to your point, that's something that if we think about the whole narrative and we think about the whole housing supply, that's something that's an asset right now, and we're doing really well in Greer, and we want to make sure we maintain that to keep prices from getting, exorbitant and affordability getting worse.
Mr. Booker, you want to wrap this conversation up, please, sir? Did you have another question?
Oh, well, I don't have another question, but I do want you to, I know we've got a lot of people that are involved in housing. Could you kind of tell us who all is in the audience?
I sure can try. All right, I'll go quick. I know we have Don Deck with LISC. We have Katie Davenport, the Chief Strategy Officer with Community Works. They manage the city of Spartanburg's Community Housing Trust Fund. We have Amber Stewart, Director over at Greenville Housing Fund. We probably have some other people that I don't know. If there's other people, you want to raise your hand? It'd be great to meet you.
Loretta Presley with the Posey Group. I am part of touring the Upstate Realtors Association.
Awesome.
I'm also Marlo Kamen. I'm a private investor and also a real estate landlord.
Great. Thanks y'all for being here.
We've got
I want to
one of
make
our
one more
commissioners from
comment.
the CPW and some of the administration there as well, too, that have joined us as well.
In terms of one of the goals that I think everybody would agree, is to keep the housing stock satisfactory. You don't want to see housing deteriorate, and that's when you see the 25.9% of the houses are at least 45 years old or older. Those are the houses that are going to need repairs in the future, whether it's HVAC or roofs or sidewalks or front porches or accessibility issues. So that's why the rental inspection ordinance is good. And you take, one of your goals simply should be is maintain a quality housing stock, whether it's built in 2026 or 1965.
Thank you, sir. We're going to take we appreciate all the information. I'm sure that you can get with Mr. Cahill if you want additional information. He'll work on the items that we've identified, and we appreciate all the work that you've done for us and look forward to continuing that relationship. So thank you. With that, I will call the workshop to close. Council will take about a 5-minute break.